Hello, welcome to Conversations with Educators. I'm your host, Jerome Ellison, and today I have a special guest, educator Andrea Miller. Thank you, Andrea, for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for inviting me.
Thank you. All right, so let's get right into it. My first question is, when did you know you wanted to become an educator and why?
Oh, good question. So, interestingly enough, I always had a suspicion that I wanted to get into education.
Mhm,
I just thought that it would happen much later in my life.
mm,
So, initially, when I went to college, I actually went pre med. So,
mm.
I thought that I wanted to be a heart surgeon.
Wow.
And I got to college and recognized pretty quickly that I didn't really like science that
Mm,
much, at least
mhm,
not at that level. It was interesting, but I didn't like it enough. But I think a lot of times, I think students that were kind of like me, where, K-12 didn't come hard to me.
mm,
And I think a lot of times students like that are automatically pushed to certain professions, like doctor, lawyer,
mhm,
So I think that was deposited somewhere in my head, and it didn't help that my parents are Jamaican. So I hear from a lot of people that are like first generation
mhm,
Americans that those are the occupations they push. So it took me a minute to realize that I don't want to do medicine. So I went from heart surgeon to dental. I
mm,
think I want to be a dentist, then
mhm,
maybe pharmaceuticals. And then finally, I was like, I don't like this, and decided to major in economics and public policy.
mm,
So a lot of econ and public policy majors at my college where I went to Duke University tended to go to Wall Street or to a consulting firm. So I kind of was in that path and track. I didn't end up in any of those spaces. And in hindsight, it was great because I didn't need to be there. But I did end up in marketing. I got a marketing certificate and minor. And I ended up doing corporate account marketing for Enterprise Rent-A-Car
mm,
for a year. I was very good at it. I enjoyed marketing, but I didn't necessarily enjoy that industry.
mhm,
And at that point, I was like, let me give education another try. And I think the seed actually was planted in my junior year of college.
mm,
I took a class called the Economics of Education
mm,
as part of my public policy major. And in that class, we really began talking about like disparities and what causes like gaps in learning and lack of access to education.
mhm,
And me realizing that I fell in a lot of those buckets. I didn't realize it.
mhm.
So I think the seed was planted there, honestly. And I did actually apply to Teach for America coming out of college, and I didn't get into the program, which I mean, I think I did end up working for Teach for America full time. So I
Mhm.
understand now, I think, why I didn't get in. But
Mm,
I think that's when the seed was planted for education. So when the corporate account marketing didn't work out, I was like, I think I want to just go into education just on my own, not
mm,
through any type of program, not through a core or anything like that. I just want to enter education, and I wanted to teach econ.
mm,
I wanted to teach economics, and I wanted to provide access for kids that look like me to to subject areas, particularly subject areas that were not, they didn't have a lot of access to it, so that when they got to college or career, they wouldn't struggle in
mm,
ways that I struggled at a school like Duke University. So that was
mm.
kind of like my first in. Yeah.
I love that. I love that. And when you said heart surgeon, I'm like, okay, I can see that. You know, now you're actually working on the hearts and minds of students. So kind of doing some kind of heart support in the same way, you know?
Yeah.
Um, my next question is, what has been your most memorable moment as an educator and why?
Oh, so many so many memorable moments. I don't know if I can actually pick just one,
Mhm,
but I think my most memorable experiences is when students kind of let me know the purpose that I've
mm,
served,
mm,
like in their life. Because sometimes you're just, you're doing things, you're just depositing seeds,
mhm,
and you don't ever know when those seeds are gonna sprout.
mhm,
But then you hear something or you see something, and you're like, okay, something was working out here.
mhm,
And so I always think that every educator should kind of have like like one or two things where they're like, I don't care what anyone says about me, but I really don't want a child or student to ever say this. And whatever that thing is. For me, I never wanted a student to say I was lazy as a teacher. And I never wanted for a student to say she didn't teach. That irked me. And not the kind of like, she doesn't teach because like you never came to school. Like not like that. You know, because sometimes, you know, students can get in their feelings about stuff, but like literally she never taught. I never wanted that to happen. And I remember I had a conversation with a student one time and she had to take, I guess, like, you know, some type of test, whether it's like an end of course test or something like that. And she came back around and she told me, she was like, I've never passed any of these tests, like she was a senior at the time. She said, I've never passed any type of test at the end of a course ever. I just always thought I was never a good test taker. I taught her math and social studies. So I taught her 9th grade math and senior level econ. And she was like, Ms. Miller, your exams were the only ones I've ever passed. And it let me know that I can pass the test. I just don't think I was being taught properly. And that comment stuck with me because I'm not a person that like leans on tests like that. I can imagine. And like I said, I was a student that kind of stuff didn't trip me up. Like school was not hard for me. Whatever the test was, I was going to pass the test. But I can imagine that if you're a student and every single time you're being tested, you never can pass. And like what kind of message that can send to you. So her telling me that was real pivotal, you know, for me at that point. Yeah.
Love that. I love that. My line would be, he doesn't care. Like I always wanted I want students to know that I care, regardless of how well they do academically. I think if students know that teachers care, I think that can be just as empowering as, you know, what you said as well. You know, once we empower the students and they'll take risk and they'll believe in themselves, which is like half or more than half the battle in the school system.
And I agree, because now that I'm not teaching anymore, like my main thing is I just now want for students to be seen and heard. I mean, you're always teaching something, right?
Yep.
But that's the biggest thing, is that I want them to feel like they're seen as their true, authentic self, and that that they feel heard, and that they don't feel like they have to compromise themselves in order for me to see them and hear them. Yeah,
I love that. So as we know, education, teaching is very difficult, right? So my next question is, what has been your most difficult challenge, and how did you overcome that challenge as an educator?
Honestly, the most difficult challenge in education is not the kids, it's the adults and the system, in my opinion. And I don't think I've overcome it.
We're still trying to.
I think we're still trying to overcome some things. Oh my God. Like, you got a lot of broken people working for a broken system.
Can you explain?
A lot of broken people working for a broken system. So let's talk about the system first. The education system in this country was not even created for everyone to learn. It wasn't initially created for every gender to learn, and it most certainly wasn't created for every race, color, or creed to learn. And so now that everybody is part of the education system, is still not being served by that education system, because the system is still operating in a number of ways in the way that it was created for. So the thing is, like, I don't even know if it's so much that the system is not working. It's working based on how it was created to work initially, which was to exclude, and I think in everyone, in people's efforts to try and make something that was already exclusive inclusive, it's almost like putting Band-Aids on a bullet wound. It was not created for that purpose. And I feel like in order for it to be a system that works, we're going to have to dismantle and tear down a vast portion of the system that already exists and just rebuild it. Because trying to tweak and fine tune and maybe change this one thing, it's like, if you have a fork and you need a knife, trying to push the prongs of a fork together to make a knife, it's just futile. Like, leave the fork alone and go make a knife. Go
like
make a
that.
knife.
I
So
like
the knife can be what a knife needs to be. And I think that's what's happening, like with our education system as it is. It's just a broken system. Now, then you got broken people up in the broken system.
Yeah.
And they're broken for a vast, number of reasons. I mean, racism still exists. There's still bigotry. There are educators who still have their own biases and stereotypes about a number of different things. There are different generations teaching a generation, and all of those generations have traumas and baggage and things that they've picked up along the way that is not serving this current generation too well. And if they're not willing to let go of that, which a lot of times is steeped in ego, then our current generation that's learning, this Gen Z generation, they're not going to get what they need from the education system. So I feel like that's my biggest challenge on a day-to-day basis is trying to work within a system that I full well know is broken, and trying to work with people that have some very interesting mindsets about teaching and learning and who can learn what and things of that nature, whether it's, in a school or just in the system overall. Working with people like that and knowing that you yourself can't teach every child. You have to because where I am now, like sitting on school leadership, you have to lead through people. Which means when you're in the classroom, the easy thing, I shouldn't say easy, but I guess the thing you can control is you can control yourself. It's like, you got 30 kids, as long as my mindset is together and as long as I'm together, we good. Like, you're going to get from me what you need to get from me. When you begin to move out of the classroom and now you're managing or coaching or leading other people, you cannot teach every single child. So now you have to run up into this person's mindset, how this person thinks, this part of the system that is not helpful. Now, how do you coach somebody through a mindset? That is hard. And sometimes very, impossible. So that I don't think I've conquered that one yet. I work through that like daily, whether it's like, having to build relationships with people to really get to the root of why they think certain things, having to show people that something different can happen. Unfortunately, in some cases, trying to figure out how we going to just move you away from this space and situation because you're not best for our kids right now, in a way that still maintains your integrity and mine. Even though I'm not an administrator, so I don't hire and I don't fire, but I do advise and make a decision. That's my best answer for that.
That's a lot. I do think a lot of it is, kind of deprogramming people and trying to push people to be more flexible with the times, because as you said, generations change and every generation needs something different. So if we can't have a one set system that's not flexible to meet the needs of new generations, then it's not going to be good for all, like you said before. I would say this, let me ask you this then on top of that. I know there's a lot of places to start, but if you had a chance to, if we started in one place as an educational system, what change do you think we should start with in our system in order to move toward progress?
There are two.
Okay, actually. I'll take two.
You take two.
I'll take two.
Number one, so social and emotional learning is now like the buzzword. Kids need social and emotional learning. Let me tell you why that'll never work. It's not going to work till the adults get social and emotional learning. So the first thing I would do is, before we talk about these kids and everything they need, and they need it, I'm not saying that they don't. You need to get these adults and get them some therapy and because it's some stuff. It's some stuff that needs to get cleaned out, flushed out, healed before they can kind of make some of those shifts and moves you just alluded to. So that would be one. And then I think the second thing is what we teach, like what we teach and how we teach it, like what is considered to be like the scope and sequence of what students need to learn in K-12 education, that just completely needs to be dismantled. There's a lot of things that are required, and I don't even know why they're required, and things that are not required, but it's going to help you in this world, whether it's financial education or, a number of different things. Ensure that there's more Afrocentricity in our education and representation of what people learn. Like, what we learn needs to completely be dismantled. So I would say those two things.
I think those two are spot on. And I also think this pandemic that we've gone through really showed that those things that you mentioned are exactly what we need, right? Social emotional learning. People are really going through a lot during this pandemic, and it's hard to teach and it's hard to learn when socially and emotionally you're not right. And as teachers, if we can't be right in ourselves, we can't be there to support our students in the way that they need, right? And the other thing, there has to be more emphasis put on other things, right? Economic empowerment, financial literacy. Those are things that we needed, and we realized we needed in the pandemic. Physical activity, health, science, focus on those things, right? Get people more healthier and prepared to be able to deal with something like a pandemic or virus that's going around. Education on food and what we put into our bodies. All those things really came to a head during the pandemic. And I think if our system is more flexible, then we'll adapt and realize that we need to make some changes in our curriculum and to what we teach in order to make well-rounded children who can adapt and grow and be, emotionally intelligent overall.
And I think in addition to that, it's like specifically for people of color, specifically for Black people in this country, we have to remember that the bar, whatever the bar is, was not set by people who look like you. So you have to be careful. You have to be careful about the messaging that we are sending to students. Because I would admit that like that bar that we all probably chased, it wasn't created by anybody that looks like us. So the question is that the bar we need to chase, or do we need to set our own bar?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. Because that bar has led to people discrediting certain students, saying that they belong here, but they don't belong over here. And it's tricky when now you have, we already don't have enough Black people in education. And it's tricky when those Black people that are in education, you're trying to serve this master within this system, and now you become part of the system because you're holding the bar that wasn't really created for the kids that look like you. But if they don't meet the bar, then they won't get at the table that everybody's been clamoring to get a seat at and bring a folding chair to. And it's like, at what point are we going to say, screw the table? We're going to teach you to build your own table. Because guess what, love? Table wasn't even built for you. So instead of trying to meet this bar and scrounge and get a seat here and bring your folding chair and all this other stuff, we're going to just teach you how to be self-sufficient and create your own bar, So I always think that for people in this country of color, we have to kind of keep those things equally. We have to keep everything in perspective, because it's all important.
I love that. So last question. So I want you to, this one is called Choose Your Teachers Wisely. So I want you to pick one teacher, and this can be in school or out of school, because education happens both ways. So one teacher who you remember, who empowered you, who educated you to become a better person, and give them a shout out and tell us why.
So I know that it was a group of teachers, and okay. The reason why I don't know specifically, it's a group of teachers, and I'll tell you why it's a group of teachers. Like I said to you before, my parents are Jamaican. They're from Jamaica. All my family's from Jamaica. I was born here. So I'm the first generation born here. My parents didn't understand the US school system, right? They kind of know the system they came from. So from, I would say, maybe first grade, kindergarten to fourth grade, I went with another childhood friend of mine whose parents were also Jamaican, but she's born here. We went to like a small private Christian school. Wasn't like an expensive school, but just because most schools in Jamaica are parochial. And so it's like, okay, we're going to send you to this school while we figure out the public schools in here. So 5th grade was the first time that I went into the public school. And when I went into the public school, it was, you know, my teachers recognized pretty early that like academically, I was ahead of the students. And the school that I was at had a magnet program, but it was like a lottery program. So it wasn't just like, I think you can be in there, so you can be in there. And this was an answer to like segregation, because before that magnet program in DeKalb County at the time, they had what's called M to M. So it was majority to minority, because all of the white students were kind of bottlenecking in the north end of the county and all of the Black students in the south. And so they were like, okay, you can sign up to be part of a program where you go to a school where you're the majority, a school where you're the minority. What ended up happening is there was a big influx from south to north, but not from north to south, because there was a perception that the schools on the north end were better, right? So that didn't help. So then they kind of came up with this magnet program and said, okay, we're going to put magnet programs that focus on different things at different schools to entice, honestly, people from the north end to maybe consider sending their students to the south end. So that's why it was lottery, because they wanted to keep the races. So the teachers at the school at the time were like, she really needs to be in this program, but it's lottery, so we don't control the program. I go through 5th grade, and they did have a gifted program. So got into the gifted program, you know, you test into the gifted program, whatever it is that they did. One teacher, Miss Stroud, she was over the gifted program. And the reason I have to shout her out first is because they would do these like gifted field trips, and my mom didn't have the money to send me on those trips, you know, even if when you divide it up into the payments, she never, you know, she didn't necessarily have the money at the time. But Miss Stroud would pay for me and like let my mom pay her back on the back end. And everybody don't do stuff like that.
Nope.
So I want to shout her out. And there are a lot of things that I do now for students because it was done for me. That whole like, you'll love how you're loved is true. So when I see students that kind of fall into that bucket, I can't do it for every student, but I do it. So that's one teacher. So now I'm in 5th grade. They're trying to get me to the magnet program. We go into the lottery. 6th grade comes, and we find out that they went through the lottery and I didn't make it in the lottery. And ironically, the other day I was cleaning out my dad's house, because he's now at like a personal care home, and I found the letter. Your, you know, parents, your child not making it to the magnet program. So, all right, go to school in 6th grade, go through the first week of school. And another teacher, 2 teachers actually, Lucas and Miss Holton, came to me and they said, next week you're gonna go to this classroom. And the classroom they told me that I was gonna go to was a magnet classroom. And I'm like, I ain't making any lottery. They were like, no, but you're gonna go to that class. And I was like, okay. I go home and I'm like, Mom, they said I'm gonna go to this class. And she was like, okay. And from that point forward, I was in the magnet program. To this day, I have no idea what paperwork, because this was like a lot, like, you know, when you do those
it's
like,
legit. It's legit.
This is legit. It's not just somebody, you know, writing on a sheet of paper. Like, this is through the district. I don't know who said what. I don't know who slipped something somewhere else. I don't know if somebody put their job on the line. All I know is from that point forward, I was in the magnet program and got access to education that was more in alignment with what my ability was. And now, like, even some of my best friends since that time, I met in that program. And that program opened up a ton of opportunities for me as well academically. And so those would be the group of teachers those two ladies that I would say made the biggest impact. And I would give them a shout out right now. And so, like I said before, when people do stuff like that for you, when you see the opportunity, like I have paid it forward, and I will continue to pay it forward because, you know, again, you're in a broken system. And so you're not going to really be able to push change unless you're willing. You kind of have to pick which rules you want to break.
I love that.
I'm not going to lie and sit here to say that, like, I think any educator that's worth anything, you've broken a rule or two or 12 or 20.
Yeah.
Just pick the one that can keep you employed.
Exactly. Exactly.
So,
and I think it's always the teachers who go that extra mile. And like you say, sometimes step over a boundary or cross a rule because they see something in you and they know you have potential. And then that can change your life. I think it changed your life. And I can tell just by how you're talking that you've done things for students who impacted their lives as well because of what was done for you. You paying it forward. And I think that's all we can do. And the more we do that, the more of a better chance we give our students a chance to be successful in the system.
Agreed.
Yeah. So that's all. Thank you, Andrea. I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been great. You shared so many great stories and so much great insight. And I appreciate you for coming on. So I want to say thank you again before we get off.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All right. Thank you guys for watching. Stay blessed. And remember, education over everything. Bye. That was